to thank for that. But we're going to try this anyway. 517. Brother Dew, good to see you. I found a secret place of comfort and release, a special place of healing, a quiet place of peace, and everyone who dwells there finds rest beneath God's wings. In the shade of his pavilion, new strength he always brings. I find hope, I find grace, far away from the world's embrace. He gives me rest, he keeps me safe. I find his strength, I seek his face in the secret place. Verse 2. With every trial he brings, my Lord will make a way to strengthen and protect me, to help me face each day. Leads me through the valley to draw me closer still, knowing even in the shadows I find his perfect will. I find hope, I find grace, far away from the world's embrace. He gives me rest, he keeps me safe. I find his strength, I seek his face in the secret place, in the secret place. Amen. You may be seated. We are pressing on in Revelation chapter 11. I really wanted to end Revelation chapter 11 last week, but there's just way too much more to go through. And Revelation 11 and verse 18, and I'm going to ask Brother Angel if he'll read that for us. Revelation chapter 11, verse 18. So I want to focus on the last portion of the verse where it says the time of the dead, from that point to the end of the verse. There is a judgment coming. It's unavoidable. It's inescapable. And it will not fare well for those that are rebels at heart. The Bible tells us very clearly that sin is, how do I say this? It provokes a holy God. And what we saw happening earlier in Revelation chapter 11 also provokes anger in the hearts of the wicked because they cannot sin and get away with it. God is making it very clear that their sin will be punished. So in Revelation 11:19, it says that the temple of God was open in heaven. There was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. There were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. A study of the heavenly temple is, to me, it's a very interesting thing. I've done that. I've studied the temples, the tabernacle in the Old Testament, and then the temple of Solomon, and then, the temple that they built after the captivity, and there's no temple now, but there are some things about the temple that will be built we can study and learn. And then this temple, which is in heaven, the temple of God, is open in heaven. It's mentioned 11 times in the book of Revelation. It's always described as a literal place. Now, is heaven a literal place? It is a literal place, but not necessarily a physical place in the sense that we understand physical things. Okay? It's a place that you get to by way of your glorified body, because this body is not going, right? So, Revelation 7 verse 15 is the first mention of a physical temple where it's clearly not figurative in any sense. And it says in Revelation 7:15, "Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them." So there's a temple in heaven. There's various persons described as being in the temple. You've got the great multitude from every tribe and tongue and nation and people, various angelic beings, and of course what we find here, the mention of the throne of God and he that sitteth on the throne. So God himself is also in the temple. There are various items that are described as being in the temple. Here we have the throne of God. We have in Revelation 11:19 the mention of the ark of his testament. And then presumably the altar from Revelation chapter 6 and verse 9. Remember the souls that were martyred under the altar. So there are passages about the temple that are written, and sometimes it's written, it sounds like figurative language, like in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 15. Steve, would you read that for us? Revelation 3 verse 15. Psst, psst, psst.
I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would know where cold or hot. Revelation 3:15.
That was Revelation 3:15. That was it. Revelation 3:15. I must have made a typo, so now I have to go and see if I can figure out what in the world it's supposed to say. Usually it's one chapter off, so let's look at 2:15. Yeah, nope, that's not it. 3. A pillar in the temple, that's what I'm looking for. Make them pillars in the temple. Give me just a moment and see if I can find it quickly here. It's kind of important. (3:12). Yeah, that's the one right there. He that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God. Obviously, that's figurative. We're not going to suddenly be turned to stone when we get to heaven. So it's obvious figurative language on that point. That's Revelation 3:12. Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, we have John measuring the temple, but it's in a point of prophecy. It's because the literal temple did not exist in John's day. Okay, it had been destroyed in 70 A.D. by the Romans when Titus came in and destroyed Jerusalem, and the book of Revelation was written around 95 or 96 A.D., so it didn't exist. So John actually couldn't measure an actual temple. So there are a couple places where it's figurative, but for the most part, when the book of Revelation speaks of the temple in heaven, it is a literal place. Okay, the book of Revelation, the book of Hebrews also speaks of a tabernacle in heaven. I'm going to pass out a couple of verses here. Brother Kim, can you take Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11? And then Brother Dew, you take Hebrews chapter 9, verses 23 and 24. Okay, and we'll just read those.
Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11. But Christ being come an high priest of the things to come, by a greater and more perfect covenant, not made with hands, that is to say, not all is his.
All right, Hebrews chapter 9, verses 23 and 24. Yeah.
that now we have here in the presence of God for
Now, I'm going to give you my opinion, which is based very strongly on biblical verses, and I'm going to show you that. But I believe that God not only told Moses how to build the temple or how to build the tabernacle, but I believe that Moses was given an actual view of it, that he saw something, okay, along with being told what to do. What we read in Hebrews was talking about the patterns of things. The patterns of things were the earthly things, that they were to be purified. And those were patterns of what? Patterns of heavenly things, all right? And so it's interesting that every reference made concerning Moses and how he was to construct the tabernacle, the Bible indicates that Moses saw the pattern. I'm going to give out 3 verses here. Exodus chapter 25, verse 40. You turn there. Do you want to read? Okay. You read Acts chapter 7, verse 44. And then, Brother Angel, back in the back, you're going to read Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5. Okay? Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5. And who did I give Exodus 25:40 to? All right. Okay. So Exodus 25:40? Go ahead.
And look that thou make them after their pattern, which was showed thee in the mount.
The pattern which was showed thee in the mount. And then Acts 7:44. Okay. So in Acts 7:44, notice the last part. It says, according to the fashion that he had seen. It's the word seen. And then in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5.
says, who served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. Perceive, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount.
Again, according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. So I believe that Moses saw what he was supposed to construct, as well as being given the directions to do so. So the earthly tabernacle was built according to both the dimensions given in the Old Testament and the actual visual example that Moses could see. And again, the statement in Hebrews 9, verses 11 and 12 is very deep. It says, Christ being come in high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So it appears that the Lord went into the temple after his resurrection and acted as our high priest, and I'm talking the heavenly temple, presenting the blood on the altar just as the Old Testament priest did on the Day of Atonement. This might help us to understand the statement that Jesus made to Mary on the morning of the resurrection in John chapter 20, verse 17. Brother Duke, can you read that? John chapter 20, verse 17. John chapter 20, verse 17.
Jesus said unto her, prove me now, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren, and say unto them, I ascend
and again, I'm not dogmatic on this. It's my opinion. I can't absolutely prove it, but it makes sense to me that because later the disciples touched him. In fact, he told Thomas, stick your fingers in my hands, thrust your hand in my side. So it wasn't that he was never supposed to be touched again, but at this point, he could not be touched. So I think, it's my opinion, that he had yet to ascend to enter once into the holy place, as we read in Hebrews. So, by way of application, earthly worship is patterned after heavenly worship, but sin has marred earthly worship. And I should add that one of the greatest purposes of the temple was the atonement of sin. That is the purpose of the altar and the Day of Atonement and all of that. That was all about the atonement of sin. It was the place where trespass offerings were made daily. People could bring their offering, make a trespass offering for sin. It was the place where the blood was sprinkled on the mercy seat every year for the sins of the people on the Day of Atonement. So it was a place that one of the main purposes of the tabernacle was for dealing with sin. But in heaven, there is no sin. The time will come when there'll be sin no more. God will create a new heaven and a new earth, and there will be no more sin. So there's no need for a place for sin to be dealt with. So what do we read then in Revelation chapter 21? We're not there yet, but Revelation chapter 21, verse 22, it suddenly says, I saw no temple therein. Right now, there is. But when God creates a new heaven and a new earth, there's no temple. There's no need for it because there's no need to deal with sin. There's no more sin. There's a couple more points in Revelation chapter 11, verse 19 that I want to touch on. Revelation 11, 19. And Brother Kim, would you read that? Revelation chapter 11, verse 19. So John mentions the ark of his testament as being in the temple in heaven. Now here's the interesting thing. This is mentioned in no other passage in the book of Revelation. In fact, it's only mentioned twice in the New Testament altogether. It's mentioned here and then in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4, where it says, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. But this reference in Hebrews is speaking from a historical perspective. It's talking about what was in the Old Testament. So the ark itself, Revelation 11:19, is actually the only reference in the Bible that speaks of the ark in heaven. Interesting. Where's the ark? That's the big question. Everybody wants to know about the ark. Where's the ark? You got, Indiana Jones out there looking for the ark. And if you saw the movie, then you know at the end, somebody looks in the ark. And boy, we Christians are sitting in the audience going, don't do it! Because we know, but they didn't know. Anyway, so what happened to the ark? Well, there's several theories, lots of theories actually. I've got, I don't know how many theories here. I'm just going to kind of go over them real quickly. One theory is that it is in Rosslyn Chapel, a 15th century Anglican chapel in southern Scotland, having been carried there many years ago, possibly by the Knights Templar. All these theories, they say, well, it's here, it's there, it's here, it's there, but nobody can furnish any evidence, right? Another one is Mount Tsurugi on the island of Shikoku, according to Masanori Takani, thought of as a Japanese Indiana Jones who noticed similarities between the Bible and the Japanese chronicles of myths and legends, concluded that the ark was on the mountain. They've been looking for it, but they've never found it. Why? Because it's not there. All right. Here's another one. The Temple of Edfu. If I made a god, if I were a lost person and I decided I was going to create some idol or something, I wouldn't name it Edfu. To me, that's just a goofy name, Edfu. Edufu or something. Edfu. An ancient Egyptian temple in southern Egypt. There is an ark there, and visitors can walk by and they can even touch it if they want to. Oh, they can touch it? And nothing happens? Yeah, that's not it. Read the Old Testament. You don't get to touch it, okay? There's a city called Antakya in southern Turkey. There's a Muslim legend that places it there. Chartres Cathedral in northern France. Supposedly in 1118 AD, the Knights Templar were digging under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and they found the ark, and they took it to France, and now it's supposed to be in Chartres Chapel. But again, you can go to the chapel, and you can say, is the ark here? And somebody will say, well, yeah, it's here somewhere. We just can't find it. If you can't find it inside the building, and people have been looking since the 1100s, chances are really good it's not there, right? I mean, that's this is 2025, so you do the math. If we round everything evenly, we've been looking for that thing for 900 years in one building, and we haven't found it. It's not there. Okay? It's not there. All right? The Limba tribe in Zimbabwe, interestingly enough, they have actually traced their genetic lineage back to Israel. Proven DNA tests show that they are actually, the Limba tribe actually comes from Jewish roots, which is interesting. That much is true. But they have a supposed ark on display for people to see. Okay? Mount Nebo, according to the book of Maccabees, which is not scripture, it's part of the Apocrypha. God told, what? Did you get that call? Okay, sir. God bless you. Have a good day. According to the book of Maccabees, God told Jeremiah to hide the ark there. All right? Again, people have been looking and nobody's ever found it. In Ethiopia, there's a place called Aksum. There's a church there called Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, Ethiopia. According to legend, the son of Solomon and Queen Sheba. So apparently Queen of Sheba and the son of Solomon got together. They had a son, and apparently he took it there. It's hidden and guarded, and you can't see it. Okay. Again, this whole hidden and guarded thing makes me real suspicious. Really, really, really suspicious. When the ark, the real ark, was traveling around in Israel, people could see it, but they could not touch it. But now everybody who claims to have the ark, they say, oh, we can't let you see it. Well, why not? Maybe it's because deep down inside, that whatever you have in that room, if there is anything in that room, is fake. Okay? That's just my theory. The Temple Mountain in Jerusalem, some think it's hidden somewhere under the Temple Mount itself. There was a guy, he was a amateur archaeologist, and he's supposedly found all kinds of stuff in Israel. He found chariot wheels in the bottom of the Red Sea, and he believes that he located the mount where Moses received the Ten Commandments, and I think he's actually dead now. But one of the things that he said that he believed he found the ark in a little cave in somewhere buried underneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But again, we've got people that say that they have seen this thing, but no one can ever produce any evidence. All right. Sea of Galilee, there's a Muslim legend saying that it will rise from the Sea of Galilee, so obviously they think that it must be under the sea. A government facility somewhere because it's too powerful and dangerous to be in the hands of mortal men. That's straight out of Indiana Jones and, the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. And then the last one, possibly nowhere. Now here's the one that I think is most real. The Babylonians came in and they destroyed the temple. They burned it to the ground. The gold that was on the walls of the wood melted down into the cracks of the stones. They gathered various vessels and things out of the temple, and they took it back to Babylon, and they listed those things. The ark is not on the list. There are some people that lived during the time that did art engravings of stuff being carried back to Babylon. The ark is not in any of the pictures. So my theory is, when they burned the temple to the ground, which they actually weren't supposed to do, but they did, they burned it to the ground, that the ark, which was made of wood, overlaid with gold, burned up in the fire. Okay? That is the most logical answer for where the ark is. Babylonians destroyed it. Jeremiah makes a list of things that were carried away in Jeremiah chapter 52. We're not going to read this, but Jeremiah 52 verses 17 through 22, he gives a pretty good list of things that were carried away into Babylon out of the temple. And Jeremiah does not mention the ark. Now, you know that if the ark was there, Jeremiah would have mentioned that. So it's not like there were just a lot of things and I forgot to write ark. It's not like that. That would have probably been the first thing on his list. But he doesn't mention it at all. When Cyrus allowed the Jews to return, they came back. They rebuilt the temple. What happened then? Well, he sent back the items that were taken from the temple. They were never lost. They were kept there. If you remember in our studies in the book of Daniel, that Belshazzar had the vessels from the temple of God brought into his big drunken feast, and they were using those vessels in their big drunken party, which of course God said, okay, that's it, I've had enough. And he gave him the writing on the wall. So after that, when Belshazzar fell, the Medo-Persian Empire rises up. Cyrus comes along. Cyrus is the king. And in Ezra chapter 1, verses 7 through 11, it says, also Cyrus the king, who brought forth the vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth out of Jerusalem, and had put them in the house of his gods. Even those did Cyrus, king of Persia, bring forth by the hand of Midradath the treasurer, and numbered them unto Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And this is the number of them: 30 chargers of gold, 1,000 chargers of silver, 9 and 20 knives, 30 basins of gold, silver basins of a second sort, 410, and other vessels 1,000. All the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,400. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up with them of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon unto Jerusalem. And again, no mention of the ark. The earthly ark, I do not believe, will ever be destroyed. If it is found, will ever be found, I should say. I believe it was destroyed. If it is someday found, I will be the first to admit that I'm wrong, and I will rejoice along with everyone else, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, as a result, going back to Revelation chapter 11, verse 19, and after saying all of that, I think we need to read that again. It says, verse 19, the temple of God was opened in heaven. There was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. So there it is. A number of Bible teachers believe that this is the ark, and that somehow God raptured the ark of God to heaven. Now, there's nothing in the Bible about that. We cannot know for sure. But if the earthly tabernacle was built off the pattern of the heavenly tabernacle, then the earthly ark was most likely built off the pattern of the heavenly ark. And if that is true, there was already one there. Why would God want another one? So having a spare doesn't make sense, not with God. Does the earthly ark exist? With all the theories, no one has ever produced one shred of concrete proof that the earthly ark exists. The last point I want to make from Revelation 11:19 is that John saw and he heard what? Lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. If you read the verse carefully, it does not lead you to believe that these things were in the temple, but rather they occurred and John witnessed it. So these aren't lightnings and thunderings and hail in the temple. Can you imagine that? Here we are in the temple of God in heaven, and there's the ark there, and there's other things there, and all of a sudden in the temple there's lightnings and thunderings and hail? It doesn't make sense. And the verse doesn't say that either. And if you read it carefully, it will bear out that they occurred, and John was witness to it. So what can we say about that? Because we're about to get into Revelation chapter 12, and things are really going to get dicey. But what we say about that is that John saw a storm coming. And the end has already been pronounced. The end is upon mankind. Things are going to now wrap up very, very quickly. And so John witnessed all of that. So that closes Revelation chapter 11. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Is it the same temple that was mentioned in the book of Isaiah chapter 6?
Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah is, where he's, yes. So let's go back there because there are some neat things there to speak of, and I do have like 7 more minutes, so we can go back there. Isaiah chapter 6.
Very famous chapter.
Yes. It's one of the key chapters of the scriptures, Isaiah chapter 6 is. But it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. So we're given the context that this is at the year that King Uzziah died, okay? So we know where we can place this particular vision in the history of the kings. And so Isaiah it says, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphim. And so the big question on everybody's mind is, was this the temple of God? Did Isaiah live before or after the Babylonian captivity? Or during? Remember, Isaiah was the prayer partner of King Hezekiah, so that puts him up close to the end, right? We know that. So was he in the actual temple?
I think it was the same temple that is mentioned in Revelation chapter 11.
You think it's the same temple? So you think it's actual physical temple in heaven? No, let me say that again. The actual literal temple in heaven. Let me say literal, not physical. Okay. All right. So this is not the earthly temple. Why? Well, the scriptures tell us that he saw the Lord sitting upon a throne. And if you read about the earthly temple and everything that's in the earthly temple, there's no throne. If there were a throne, it would be the ark, and he wouldn't say throne, he would say ark. Okay? So you're right, he is not in an earthly temple. So if he's in any temple at all, and apparently he is, he sees the Lord sitting upon a throne, he must be, at least in a vision, at the very least, in the heavenly temple. And above it stood the seraphims, each had 6 wings, with twain he covered his face. The angels involved here are not cherubim. They're seraphim. Remember the ark. The ark has cherubim facing inward, but these are not cherubim, these are seraphim. Seraphim and cherubim are different. If you remember a couple of months ago, we compared the descriptions of the cherubim and the seraphim. There are distinctive differences, so they're not the same. And so these are the seraphim, not the cherubim. So this is not the ark. This is the throne of God, and these seraphim are there. 6 wings cover his face, with twain he covered his feet, with twain he did fly. Verse 3, and one cried unto another and said, Holy, 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 is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. So he's in a literal building with posts. There's a house there. There's a throne, the throne of God there. So if he is in any kind of literal house, it must be the temple in heaven, because this does not describe the temple on earth. It cannot be the temple on earth. And so, verse 5, then said I, Woe is me, I am undone, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So I always thought this is interesting, because Isaiah admits to being an unclean preacher, but he is an unclean preacher with a repentant heart, which makes things different. Verse 6 says, the seraphim flew to him, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar, and he laid it upon my mouth. Verse 7, pausing there for a moment. If I were to take a live burning coal off, say, the barbecue grill that's sitting outside, and I put it upon your mouth, what's going to happen? You're going to get burned. Bad. And it's going to leave a mark for years to come, if the scars ever go away. You're going to be burned badly. Of course, this is not a literal physical thing here. This is a vision. And he, by the way, experiences something similar. In Jeremiah chapter 1, we have something similar in a visionary state there. And so this is a vision. He doesn't actually get his lips burned off by a live coal. This is figurative language in a vision that we're to understand what's happening to him. He's being purified. His words are being purified. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord. And so the live coal is placed upon his mouth. Having a live coal in his hand, which he took from the tongs from off the altar, he laid it upon my mouth and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thy iniquity is taken away, and thy sins purged. So this is a vision. It is not a reality or a spiritual thing. Maybe he's like John, caught up in the spirit into the third heaven or something. But it's not a physical, as we speak of it today, sort of thing. And he hears the voice of God speaking, Who shall I send? Who will go for us? Then said I, Here am I, send me. His willing heart to go. I cannot tell you how many messages, how many sermons I have heard on this passage. How many times that in missions conferences or missionaries traveling in the States or whatever, where you hear them preach this passage. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Here am I, Lord, send me. And everybody's like, answer the call, answer the call. Well, Isaiah was willing to answer the call, but he doesn't just answer the call. He asks for detail, which is nice. He gets the detail. Verse 9, and he said, Go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, see ye indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and convert, and be healed. What does God tell him? Isaiah, I'm glad you answered the call. Now I want you to go preach my message to people who are not going to listen. Your ministry is not going to grow. You're not going to build big fancy churches. You're not going to have thousands coming to the altar on Sunday mornings. You are going to preach and nobody's going to listen and they're not going to like you. And then Isaiah goes, no, you know what? I didn't really want that. I'm not signing up for that. I wanted a different kind of ministry. I wanted a big mega church ministry, so I don't want to do that. Is that what Isaiah does? No. He never says no. But he does say in verse 11, Then said I, Lord, how long? Okay, I'll do it, but can you give me some idea of how long this is going to be? Which, of course, the Lord answers the question. So what we have in Isaiah, getting back to the original question, is either a vision. He doesn't tell us it's a vision. He just says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. So he doesn't say, and I saw a vision. He doesn't say that, but he describes it as if it may be a vision. So there's a possibility Isaiah chapter 6 is a vision. The second possibility is that in some way Isaiah does make it up to the spiritual but literal temple in heaven. One of those two is true. Which one, I don't know. But yeah, you could add that to your list of places where things like this happen. Any other questions? All right, in that case, we're going to close in prayer. And Brother Dew, close us in prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Amen. Oh. I need to come down here and stop this video now.